All right, you all. We are about ready to begin our final roundtable for the evening. This is a discussion with the licensed battlefield guides. I need to make it abundantly clear to everyone that they are only speaking for themselves. They are not representing the association, the National Park Service, anybody else except yourselves. Correct. Agree? Agree. I just, again, in my position, I have the power to be self-indulgent, and I'm going to be. My very, very first visit to Gettysburg from Indiana, I was 7, maybe, and we got a battlefield guide, right? Drove our car, right? Picture with the guide as well. Formative experience, right? I mean, yeah, I fell in love with this place, fell in love with the Civil War, and it was because of a battlefield guide. We're going to get back to the big question. And I'm going to give it to you now. You're not going to answer it. We can come back to it. It's this. The vast majority of visitors who come to Gettysburg don't get a battlefield guide. We need to talk about that and how we can maybe remedy that, because I'm old school. Nothing, and I mean nothing, beats face-to-face interpretation with a real person. No app is going to ever do it. In fact, it hasn't done it. It hasn't even come remotely close. People matter. They'll always matter. That's what the visitors want. And so we're going to get to that at the very end of all this, but I need to introduce you all first, right? Before I introduce you, I've got all kinds of announcements that I need to make, all right? So just sit tight here for just a moment. Ashley's looking over my shoulder. She believes in me that I'm going to be able to get them all right this time. I'm going to make you proud, Ashley. So again, I want to remind everyone, our North Carolina at Gettysburg Conference, October 8th, 9th, and 10th. That's good. What I did not mention the first time around is that on the 10th, Sunday morning, we are going to walk Pettigrew's Attack with, I believe, 2 National Park Service historians, one of them being Chris Gwynn. That will be on Sunday. So again, here's a lineup. Friday night, Judkin Brown from Appalachia State is going to talk about North Carolina during the war. On Saturday, all-day touring, starting with the 26th North Carolina, going over to Iverson's Brigade. Ashley will be leading the tour there. And then off to Cemetery Hill, and then finally at Colesville. That's all day Saturday. I think there might have been a question about housing. Folks, you're on your own. And so if you're interested in this, I would jump on it, because we all know October is a crazy month around here, and there's all kinds of stuff. So if you're interested, you need to jump on it. As I told everyone before, we just have slots for 100 people. That's it. I didn't want to throw too much at everyone before the first panel. So I did not mention that CWI 2022 is planned. Thanks to Ashley's hard work. I'll just give you some of the speakers that we will have this year. Brooke Simpson, already mentioned, Gary Gallagher, Joan Wall, Carrie Jane, Jeffrey Ward, Carol Reardon, Bill Blair, Jim Martin, and a lot of other folks as well. As you all know, for those of you who've never been to one of our conferences, you'll discover that we touch all the bases. If you're interested in military history, you're going to find that. Interested in a little bit of cultural, social history, you'll find that. It's all there for the taking, and I'd like to believe that the attendees who come in, they're just nice, friendly, generous people. Nobody's there to try to tout how much they know, try to impress anybody. Everyone is just gets together because we have this common love and passion for Civil War history. So, 2022, our hope is it will go online by the end of July. That is the hope. I'm not going to forget, I got one more thing here, and that is to remind you all about tomorrow. So we begin tomorrow at 10:30. I will be interviewing Kent Masterson Brown, his new biography, or I should say book, not biography, of George Gordon Meade at Gettysburg. That is at 10:30 tomorrow morning. And then in the afternoon, we start the day at 1:30. As you all know, you'll see the taped tour of Jen Murray following Barksdale's attack on July the 2nd. We will then have some breaks in which Jen will be there live and in person for you to ask questions. That will stop at 2:30. And then at 3:15, Ashley Lusky, she did 2 interpretive stops, one at the Rose Farm and the other at Victoria House. And that will be from 3:15 to 4:15. That finishes Saturday. Sunday, we start bright and early, 9 a.m. We'll go all the way to 12. As you heard me before, we spend entire day with Scott Hartwig. Scott Hartwig, I should note, although he has spent his entire professional career here at Gettysburg, it makes perfect sense that he has devoted his scholarly efforts to writing about 18. He's already done one volume about the campaign. He has a second volume on the battle. It is finished. He is revising it. It's not to press yet, but we spent a day with him out there. It was fantastic. I hope you'll join us again. That is Sunday, 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. And finally, note that you can send us questions here. Just type them in the chat box. We won't be able to hear your voice, but we would like to get to them. Okay. I think I did it. Did I miss anything? Oh, I did. Come on, Ashley.
And donations.
Oh, the donations. Man, why can't I keep it all straight? It's just too much for me. You gotta have them, right? I'd be lost. It would be lost. That's what Heather sent me an email. She said, "Are you nervous about the day?" I said, "No." I said, "Man, I've got three. I have Jill Titus. I got Ashley Lusky and Heather Miller, and they take very good care of me." The other two things. One, we have the UNC discount code. You're welcome to use that. And finally, as you know, we did not charge for this event, but we certainly would appreciate any kind of donation if you have the capacity to do so. I want to again stress that those resources make a profound difference for our students. As Titus was talking to somebody here, we have a little more than, I think, 30 students, roughly, who are out in the field, all the way from Vicksburg, Mississippi, up to Boston, Massachusetts, and they are doing the things that we all believe in. They are the caretakers and the interpreters of our battlefield, and that is the perfect transition to the three people that we have with us this evening, because they have devoted significant time, very serious study to making the story of Gettysburg not just accessible, but exciting and meaningful. These are our educators. They are my peers here. I am blessed at Gettysburg. I have colleagues, not just at the college, but I have the National Park Service, and of course, the Battlefield Guide. So let me introduce them, and I will do it quickly. The first person to my right is Sue Vortman. She has been a licensed Battlefield Guide since 2001 and the two-time recipient of the Superintendent's Award for Excellence in Interpretation. Her thing is a cyclorama. I've seen her presentation. It's fantastic. And I don't want to screw this up. Just checking you are. Good. So Sue is going to be with us in 2022. I thought that we'd ask her. I didn't know if you had said yes. And you'll be speaking about the cyclorama. And that will be at CWI 2022. All right. To my immediate left is Teresa Orr. Teresa Orr has been a battlefield guide since 2016. Is that correct? You have spent much of your professional career in the Navy. Regular Navy? That's not how you say it. I say regular
Active
Navy.
and reserve.
Active and reserve, I know.
Yes.
Active and reserve. And again, I believe, if I look at my notes here, that your specialty was, you were an intelligence specialist, right?
Yes.
And then you left the Navy, you were here at Gettysburg, raised some kids, and now you're a battlefield guide. Why you became a battlefield guide, I think, is interesting. It's because your husband is a descendant of, why don't you tell the folks at home?
Patrick Farrington, First Sergeant, Company G of the 82nd New York Infantry.
And he was killed here, no?
Yes, he will be mortally wounded.
Is he buried in
He's
there?
buried at the National Cemetery.
Yes,
Here.
and that's what kind of spark.
Mhm.
You're thinking about
Yeah.
this, right? And finally, we have far left, Chuck Burkell. Chuck has been a licensed battlefield guide for a very long time. I think you're even emeritus, is that correct?
Only because of age, Pete. 2014, January 2014.
So Chuck does a wide range of tours, of course, like all the licensed battlefield guides have done. But he has, I think, in a sense, a specialty with leadership programs, especially with corporations, and Sue has done that as well. And that is, many of you might not know, it is, I don't want to call it a cottage industry, but a lot of folks come here from the business world and they want to be able to derive lessons learned from how civil officers manage their armies. And Chuck has done many of those tours as well. And I should note that, Chuck, I have in my notes here that you are have a special interest on the death of John Fulton Reynolds. Now, we know that at Gettysburg, we all get micro, right? And we like our little thing. So, Chuck, is it you're just interested in the death and not anything else about Reynolds? It's just the death.
No, it's not the death.
Oh, okay, my notes are wrong. I don't know who did this. I'll have to find someone to blame. It couldn't be me. Right, so, but you are interested in Reynolds?
Very much so.
You are. So, Chuck, you have probably not had an opportunity to read this.
I have not.
So this, Kim Brown, he has a different take on Reynolds. So I'm not gonna say anything about it. You'll have to watch tomorrow morning, or read the book, or do both, whatever you like. All right, well, thank you all for joining us. I really appreciate it, and I didn't think that we would have the time to go and talk about the history of the licensed battlefield guides, but in my notes, and you all can correct me if I have it wrong. So the battlefield guides, they became kind of a professional organization in 1915. That's really when the modern guide association came into being, when the courts, they backed the War Department, right? They said, listen, you gotta be licensed, and if you're not licensed, we're going to arrest you if you're out on the battlefield. And from my notes, there's some folks that even got arrested who were not properly licensed, right? And there we go from there. And I suspect that the three of you from time to time can talk about that history and how it figures into the association today. I want just some basic questions here about the Guide Association and its relationship to the National Park Service. And what I mean by this question, I'm not trying for you to evaluate whether the relationship is healthy or strained or any of that kind of stuff. That's not our business, and I'm not interested in it. But I think we need to sort of understand, how do you figure into the National Park Service, and how do you all work together? Sue, would you like to start?
Sure.
And if you'd like, you can, if you want to look to the camera.
Sure. Okay, so the association, this is a confusing point to a lot of people. The association is a membership-based organization that looks to the well-being of the guide force, in the sense that they're more or less a liaison to the park, and they also do what they can to make it a professional organization. Now, the discrepancy is that not every guide belongs to the association. There is a body of licensed battlefield guides, and there is a licensed battlefield guide association. So the Battlefield Guide Association is a good organization, and the only reason a lot of people don't belong is they just don't feel as connected.
Right. Good. As we continue here, we've got a little note that we need to really speak up and project. How's that? Is that gonna work? Does that work for people back home? Is that better? If any louder, I truly would be yelling. But you all got the voices for it. Hell, you're on the battlefield all the time, right? You know how to project. None of us have any troubles projecting. How's that? Are we having some technical issues? Joe?
Says it's muffled.
It's muffled? That can't possibly be muffled. Still muffled.
Other people are saying better.
That is better. All right. Echoing is another person. The elder said that. Yeah, can we move the mic? Does that have anything to do with it?
The mic is.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
right there. Right. I can put you on my shoulder and we can talk into that. How's that as a solution?
People are saying good.
Is it good? All right, well, we'll look to that, look to there, we'll really project. I'm curious, just in a very practical sense. Someone wants a licensed battlefield guide. You have your webpage, right? Type in my information. So how does that work? Does the Park Service say, all right, we've got some folks here who would like a licensed battlefield guide? Where are the guys? Where are they holding out? Is it like Caddyshack? You got your own little place, right? Right? How's it work?
That was funny. No, actually, we generally work out of the Museum Visitor Center, although that's not required. It is the most logical way to get a tour because that's where the people are.
Right.
So they run a reservation system whose job is to connect a guide to a visitor who wants a guide.
Right.
And,
Chuck, go ahead, please.
and there is a structure, a provision between the National Park Service and what we call CUAs, Commercial Use Authorizations. And there are a number of CUAs that represent various modes or types of tours, right? So those individual CUAs have access to guides and can contact guides for tours. After a while, you get individual calls from prior clients, guests, customers who contact you on your cell phone or send an email, word of mouth. Bed and breakfasts, hotels, tour companies outside of Gettysburg. So there are many different mechanisms or ways theoretically that a licensed battlefield guide could receive a tour request.
So again, I'm not trying to ask how much money do you make when you do a tour. I'm not asking that. but I think we're all curious. I assume some of this revenue, does it go to the national park? Does it go to the foundation?
Well,
I mean, you guys get your cut, so to
Right,
speak,
well-
right, yeah,
the Park Service sets the rate
yes,
that we get paid.
yes,
The foundation has a booking fee,
right,
and there's at least one other location that sells guides, if you will.
right,
They charge a booking fee. If you privately contract, so to speak, with a guide, you pay them the rate that we're allowed to charge. So we don't pick what we're gonna charge, the National Park Service does that.
and one of the takeaways though is that the park/foundation, they do get some of this revenue and it helps build their resources, yes,
Yeah,
as
absolutely.
well, so it's,
Yeah,
everyone wins, so to speak.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So I think that, at least from my perspective, handles some of the sort of basic administrative things about the guides and how they operate. And if people have questions at home, they can certainly type that in. But I want to go to the thing that is the great mystery, right? The exam, the dreaded exam. The dreaded exam. So why don't y'all let's talk about what exactly is on the exam, right? What are they asking you? Give a sense for the process, right? There's a written exam, probably an oral component, right?
Yeah.
And then you gotta do a battlefield tour.
Yes.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot. So tell us first about the written exam. What would one expect?
One should expect to sit for it and not pass it the first time.
Okay,
Because there's a misconception that because you're touring at Gettysburg, it covers nothing but Gettysburg, and that couldn't be further from the truth. You need to know pre-Civil War, pre-Gettysburg, post-Gettysburg, post-Civil War Reconstruction. It covers a large gamut, including books, authors, that sort of thing, monuments, locations on the battlefield. So we, as guides, typically recommend for a guide, a person who wants to become a guide, that they take it for fun, so they understand the requirements, and then they can knuckle down and study what they know they need to study. Because it's a pretty comprehensive exam.
so I'd like for some of you to drill down there to talk about a section that you thought either was challenging. I'm gonna get a sense again for the components of it. It seems like it's so expansive, it could go in any direction, and it appears that there's no study guide beforehand. You can't use notes, not even use notes, what?
I mean,
No.
there's a list of references, 2-3 pages long.
And so you have to be familiar with particular books, right?
Right.
But no big questions to say, hey, think about the coming of the Civil War, nothing like that.
No, you have to decide, if you have limited time to read these references, these books,
Right.
which are the most important.
Right.
You gotta pick and choose, when you're taking your test.
Skim those books, right?
Yes,
Yep,
yes,
skim.
and I mean, I learned, they announced the test, end of August 2015. And the test is always the first Saturday in December when they hold it. Up until that point, I had no idea that it's gonna be as expansive as it
Right,
is
right.
until I read the announcement of it.
Right.
And it says, oh, you gotta know about this. That's the things that you talked about. You have to know about the history of the guide force. You have to know about the establishment of the park,
Right, right,
all those kind of things.
right.
And then it was like, well, I've been going on Ranger battle walks, and I've been reading about Gettysburg. I haven't been studying all these other things.
Right, right.
So then it was, a cram session for those kind of things. And I mean, lucky for me, I picked enough of the right things to read that I was able to pass that written exam.
Being an intelligence officer paid off, right?
Intelligence specialist.
Specialist.
I was not an
I did, I
officer.
tried to promote you, yeah.
No, that's okay. Hey, I like being an enlisted person. But it really is picking and choosing, what do you need to read? And then when you take the test, you find out what you missed. And it is extremely comprehensive. There's no true false, there's no matching, it's fill in the blank. You either know it or you don't.
Yeah.
And then there's the essays.
And the two most prior examination processes have shifted somewhat considerably to the process that was in place for the prior examination processes for many years. And so there are additional steps now to just the written and the oral, the field, there are a number of interview selection processes with the National Park Service rangers and or the guide examination committee that is assisting the National Park Service. But and this kind of goes back to Sue's comment, Pete, that I would like to offer, and that is that I think if you make it to the oral, there's such a dramatic shift now in terms of what you have to demonstrate, because the assumption is that if you make it through the oral, the assumption on the part of the examination group committee, National Park Services, you know your order battle.
Right.
You know the regiments in the Iron Brigade.
Right.
You know pretty much what happened in the wheat field. Now you've got to present that in a coherent, logical manner so that the typical guests on a 2-hour car tour have some sense of what you're trying to explain and tell them, with stories, of course.
Right. So, I'm gonna be a little combative about this, right? You just said to me, you gotta know the order of battle, you gotta know the regiments in the Iron Brigade. I'm okay with that, I'm from the Midwest, I get it, I understand that that's important. And you just said right after that, Chuck, you said, yeah, for the family and what's that 2-hour tour, I'm willing to bet that 95.9% of those 2.5-hour family tours, they could care less about that, don't want to know. In fact, here's my point, and you all can comment on this. I think that the exam, as you've explained it, as I have seen it, I think there's a disconnect from what the visitors really want and what they need. And I fear that this exam, get a little provocative here, is Trivia Pursuit in some ways. Man, if you got a good memory, you'll pass it. But we know the good interpretation is what? It's, yes, certainly a command of knowledge, but it's more than that. So let me ask you, do you feel that the exam really is going to be able to weed out, or I should say it excludes possibly, some really good interpreters who just can't memorize a bunch of stuff?
I agree with you, that wasn't provocative, that was realistic,
Oh,
okay?
Yeah.
Because if you can't relate all that knowledge at a level where they have no context for it, it's pretty much useless information. And I do agree, because I think my colleagues will agree, and some guys would bristle at this.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But bottom line here is 50% of a tour is entertainment. And entertaining is not reciting an order of battle.
But what about the guest that comes who wants that?
But that isn't, you have to be prepared for that.
Right.
But that is not what the average visitor wants. They
Right.
want to relate.
Right.
And that's not what they relate to.
Right, but if you have a guest that does,
Yeah, then you have to
then
know.
then you
be ready.
need to know that. So I can see it both ways. And I guess that the point of the interview and the oral exam is to prove that all this knowledge you have that you've proven by passing the written exam, you can now use that and relate it to a tour. Your average tour is somebody who may know nothing about Gettysburg. They might be passing up Route 15 and they say, oh, Gettysburg, and it's like, oh, something happened there. So your average tour may be that kind of a person, but you could walk out to someone, a random tour, somebody walked up to the ticket desk, wants a tour, and you walk out, and they want to go to East Cavalry Field. So you have to know that, because you never know what you're going to get. So the whole process is to make sure you can do both of those things.
So Pete, here's a practical example. The day before yesterday, I accepted a tour for July 2nd. Now, I don't think this family is probably viewing this, this virtual program tonight, but, so that's really neat when you have a chance to talk to your guests ahead of time, right?
Yes.
Because,
Right.
so it's a family of 5, and the person that I spoke to relayed to me that they're coming to Gettysburg, they're from Virginia, and they have a 7-8-year-old who is in 1st grade, and they want the tour for that child, okay? Now, the other people are all adults. So the challenge I have now is to kind of figure out, okay, they want me to present this tour to the 1st grader, but how am I going to keep these other 4 adults, even though they told me that? I realized, again, based on our experience, my experience, my colleagues' experience, that even though they're telling me that I have to keep all of them invested and engaged with relevancy to all age groups, even though they've already told me something in terms of an expectation.
Chuck, what you said just reminds me that, you all have a classroom that is more challenging than what I can possibly imagine. And yet, you have the best classroom in the world because it is that historic site. You can have an off day, and that's all right because the historic site's gonna pick up slack for you, right?
I agree.
So I'm gonna keep on this test just a little bit. Every exam privileges knowledge, right? I mean, so as you think about the exam and what it tends to emphasize, I know you all said that it certainly is more expansive than what it's ever been before. But clearly, to prepare for that exam, to pass that exam, it's stressing, it's emphasizing that you really need to know this. Tell me, what is it privileging and how does that in the end, and this is a little retread of what we just talked about, but still, how does it sort of shape the interpretation of this battlefield? So we'll start with, what does the test really privilege in terms of the knowledge that it thinks is the most important for you to have?
I think there's, obviously, a major portion of it is Gettysburg itself. But the importance of everything that comes before and after Gettysburg, you can relate to it, because why are we here? Because of all these things that happened before. And after this is over, why do we still fight for 2 more years? So having some knowledge of all of that helps you to better interpret what happened here.
Chuck, go ahead.
I would certainly echo what Teresa just mentioned, and the thought that I had was the challenge of putting this event that happened in 1863, 158 years ago in a couple of weeks, putting that event into today. Our country and our world needs the history of what happened here in Gettysburg. We need it, and we're going to need it tomorrow. So we have the privilege as being licensed guide historians of interpreting this story for our guests and visitors for what it means to the United States and the world. And that's critical.
Sue, do you have any thoughts?
It's just that when you said about having such an incredible classroom, you can't be further from the truth, or you couldn't be closer to the truth by saying that, because it's not the guide who's the star in that car.
Right.
It's the battlefield. And so the knowledge we gain from preparing for the test, I think, allows us to appreciate a greater context so that we can simply connect those people to that story. It really doesn't matter about which brigade fought which brigade, it's which body of human beings
Right.
fought which body of human beings and why.
Right.
And allowing them to connect to that connection to this field is so powerful.
So, you know, I think it's worth mentioning Jen Murray's book, On a Great Battlefield. It's a fantastic institutional history of the battle, and she pays close attention to the important, lasting work of John Latcher, former superintendent, and said kind of what you just said, you know, that what the park had always done very well, where did they fight? And that's sort of where I was going with, because I still think that this exam privileges where did they fight. And I think you can look that up, and we got a lot of monuments, and we've got maps that can do that for people, right? You don't need to memorize that, at least I don't need to. But Latcher said, you know, we do that really well, but what we don't do well is why, and why did it matter? And I think that the three of you, what you have pointed to is, again, shows how interpretive approaches change over time, how they change. And what you're doing and what the three of you have said is so critical, right? So important. And so let's get to what I think Chuck was angling toward. And that is, so people need more history. They need more Civil War history. They need history here at Gettysburg. So Chuck, get us started here. Tell us, give us something specific, you know, from your own experiences or something that you think that should happen so that we can do a better job of getting people to think about today within a perspective that is really grounded in the past.
Well, the thought that came to my mind, again, Pete, as you're asking the question, you're kind of looking at me, so.
I can look over here and be like, I'll look at you soon.
No,
Chuck, go right ahead.
We receive, in a non-COVID era, we receive hundreds and hundreds of middle school bus tours beginning in late March through early June. I have to say they're particularly challenging, right? And early on, I accepted the role where I would participate as a guide and try to do some of these middle school bus tours. And the thought that I had was, if there is one student on the bus that somehow I can convey something where they will remember, and maybe it will bring them back here someday, or it will motivate them to read further or to ask questions or to do something that is history related, Civil War history, Gettysburg related, then maybe I would have achieved something. So when you said, what can we do? I mean, there are many groups where I will ask them a question: what year did this country become a democracy? When did we become a republic? They don't know the date. They don't know where it happened. They don't know when the Civil War began. So there is a lack of overall, I think, American history. Some groups are well prepared, others are not. And I think we have a collective responsibility with that.
I think you're right. I think that we are all so focused on battlefield preservation of the land itself, and I'm absolutely a big proponent of that. And yet it seems to me that if we really want to engage the American people, it begins by providing the necessary funding for underserved schools to bring their students here. And guess what? I don't care if they're not prepared and they don't know, I can live with it. Because I think we all can attest to the fact, all you gotta do is climb on Devil's Den, right? Or go to a little round top, and not that you'll know the paths that way, but it sparks the imagination. And so it's always been my hope, maybe I shouldn't be lobbying like this, but I'm gonna do it, that, that the foundation, which of course I'm sure has all kinds of demands upon it, but that the Gettysburg Foundation can find donors to be able to go to inner city Baltimore or central PA, right? Where we've got poor kids, as we all know, whose parents have not had that experience or the resources to take them here. And there is nothing that has a greater impact in ensuring that young people as adults will come to a historic site than getting them here. We have, I think, a false notion that if you can see yourself in a museum or historic site, that you'll automatically come. Now, I think we should do that because I think we need to do a good complex history. But it's, I think, incredibly unreasonable and unfair to expect that, African Americans should start coming to Gettysburg because we're finally talking about slavery in the museum. That's unreasonable and that's unfair. They don't do that because this place has always been out of reach for them historically. And I think we can break that boundary if we get the money to the schools and say, come up here. And I can only imagine, you're a brave man, Chuck. I would not volunteer for a junior high career. I'd just let them loose, right? I'd let them go. But I think that you point to something that's super important. What about you all? Have you had either, if you want to relate an experience with a visitor in which you've been able to talk? I'm going to push the envelope here. You say you want to be relevant. How do you deal with politics of today, particularly Confederate monuments? Boy, that must be a real minefield for you all. So how do you deal with that?
It is, absolutely is. And I hate to say this because, again, the test is comprehensive. It seems to have a lot of not nonsensical, but stuff that would be difficult to utilize beyond your test. But actually, that's not true when it comes to monuments, because on the test, you're gonna know when the era in which all of the Confederate monuments were placed, which is extremely telling when you now come to this monument controversy and you get a person in your car that says, that Virginia monument has Robert E. Lee on it.
Right.
What's with that?
Right.
And then you have to be able to tell them,
So what did you say? What did you say?
Well, with the Lee monument,
Yeah, what
it
do you
was an effort on the part of Northern veterans to allow a reconciliation, but it was also a part on Confederate veterans or Confederate state legislatures in a lot of cases to have a presence here. Because this was a Union battlefield with a strong Union history right up until 1895, when there were no Confederate monuments. One. one Confederate monument on the battlefield. And so that story of monumentation, that story of the early ones were still a mix of politics and
Right.
honor,
Right.
supposedly honoring the dead. But you get into the 1960s.
Right.
I lived through the 1960s.
Right.
I know that some of the worst Civil War crises in this country happened in the 1960s. And I don't stand at an Arkansas monument put up in 1966, and I don't proudly talk about
Right.
the honor of the Arkansas
Right.
soldiers.
Right.
I talk about, yeah, there was a lot of ugly stuff going on in our country, and this was an in-your-face answer to it.
Well, absolutely, and Jill Titus, who is directly below us here, I don't know if you all know this, she has a new book coming out, and guess, it's published by, you can probably guess, UNC Press. You'll get a discount code to purchase Jill Titus's book, 1963. It's fantastic. Look, I've already read portions of it. I've done some tours with Jill, which I've really enjoyed. And what it's done for me, it's helped me talk about those monuments in the 1960s, and they were put up to make a statement that was very much within Cold War culture and obviously anti-civil rights.
Yeah.
I'll even go back to the Virginia Monument. Jill does some great presentation out there. Maybe we can talk to her to give it a tour. Because, you know, she loves doing all the administrative stuff so much, right? I hate to take her away from that. But 1963, it'll come out. Jill, when's it coming out?
September.
September, all right, September.
But Pete, to that point, then the obvious rest of the conversation is, should we take it down?
Yeah.
And that's where we have to take an individual stand, not a licensed guide stand, not a person who works under the auspices of the park licensing. It's where we sometimes gingerly and gently state, it needs to be here to let that conversation continue.
You're very well said.
Yeah.
I come to you, I'm a visitor. I mean, you drive my car around, right? I got a Mercedes.
Cool.
I don't, but I'm imagining. And I say to you, at the Virginia Monument, this man committed treason. He was a slave owner. And worst of all, he got defeated here, and for God's sake, he's got the tallest equestrian here, does he not? Tallest equestrian, right? I don't think it should be here. How do you respond to something like that? How do you create a conversation when a person has an opinion that's so strong? And I'm not saying that opinion is right or wrong, because we know as interpreters, you're there to interpret and facilitate. So how do you respond to a visitor like that?
You know, it's kind of funny, because I don't think I've had anybody say that. But, you know, more often, it's, they shouldn't take these down.
Right.
And I think the way you have to look at it is that, you know, it's tough with the officers, the guys that you know were slaveholders, that it's a, what is it, a rich man's war and a poor man's fight. So they wanted this war to preserve slavery. But the average soldier on either side is not fighting for slavery, one way or the other. It's patriotism for their respective countries. It's in the North to keep the Union together, in the South to protect their individual rights as they see it. It's a job. You know, for some of them, it's just a way to make money for their families. So most of them aren't fighting because of slavery. And so, you know, yes, you could consider them treasonous people, but you've got to bring the country back together. And for me, I always tell people at the end, Lincoln is not trying to win a war. He's trying to bring the country back together. And so you kind of have to couch it that way too, that, yeah, there were some, what you would consider treason. I mean, you look at Forrest, Nathan Bedford Forrest, you know, and the horrible things that he and his men did.
Right.
So yeah, there's an awful lot of that. And when you see that the Ku Klux Klan starts as a result of, you know, the end of the Civil War.
Well, the war continues in a
Yes.
different form, but then it continues.
Yeah.
And that's important. The monuments also remind us that the war continued, but in a different form.
Yeah.
And yet the landscape, which we talked about, how the battlefield is this great classroom, but it's a deceptive classroom. The beauty of the place, it creates that spirit of heroism.
And the monuments.
And the monuments, you add that into it, and suddenly it's very difficult to be able to convey to people the brutality and the horror of war. I want to make sure we get to our audience here, and I have a few questions. Thank you, Joe, for getting that. what makes an effective or successful tour in your mind? What makes it? So I'll help us out here. We know that the visitors have to meet you halfway, and I suspect that for most of the people who have signed up, they kind of know what they're getting themselves into. So you're pretty good there. So we'll take that as one thing that's elemental. You got to have an audience that wants to be there, right? And I have to say, I will boast about Gettysburg College students. I'm very grateful for the kids I have, and they are fantastic. They want to be here. And I had talked to incoming students, 3 from California, all Civil War buffs. They can't wait to come out here. Yes, it's great. That's fantastic. So Chuck, we'll start with you. Chuck, tell us, what in your mind, what makes a compelling, powerful tour in the field?
Well, I don't want to simplify it, but it's a feeling. And the feeling represents an emotion where you as the historian guide feel like you gave every ounce of effort, whether it's freezing out, whether you mostly could not get out of the vehicle because of threatening weather or precipitation. So you gave it your best effort. And I would probably think that part of that ingredient is you got some level of feedback from your guests that they responded to your effort. You know, and it's surprising in some cases where, you know, you're telling a story or sharing some history and you can see on the faces of your guests, they're welling up with tears. And you didn't expect that, you didn't anticipate that. So you obviously touched something within that caused an emotional reaction. But, you know, I know you're trying to be sort of exact here, Pete, but I would have to say it's a feeling that you sense, that you know you did your best, and you got some level of response and evidence of engagement from your guests.
Can I answer my own question?
Sure.
I mean, I think that's good. I think for me, I just reminded of what Dr. Reardon mentioned, the Henry Owens letter, which I happened to see for the first time a few weeks ago. And that letter was a recounting of a dream in which Owen had fallen asleep lamenting his situation in the ranks because he had lost so many men in the 18th Virginia. And that dream, he recounted to his wife because she was complaining. And he said, we have so much to be thankful for. And in that dream, yes, he found himself back on the field, Pickett's charge, but that there was a shadow in front of him. And wherever he moved, the shadow was in front of him. He could not escape him. And he got into the maelstrom of the charge, and there was a shadow. And of course, he said men were dying on all sides of him. And he came out of the charge, and there was a shadow still. He could not get rid of it. And the shadow spoke to him and said, I am your guardian angel. I have protected you and will continue to protect you. He said he woke up crying. I have not read that letter on the battlefield. A teacher group contacted me to do Pickett's charge. I'm still not my wife here. I said to him, I'm going to do it. Beth's like, why are you doing that? You're doing this all the time. I said, I've not read that letter on the battlefield, and I can't wait to do it. And when you can connect words to ground and then draw, as Dr. Reardon did, right? Here is a man who we would say is suffering from some kind of form of trauma, but I would take a different spin on this. I think that illustrates how we're all very different, obviously, in how we deal with violence, and we deal with it differently because of the time in which we live. They had different attitudes and ideas about violence than they certainly did about religion. I would say that that dream reveals how he was able to deal with the trauma and stress of war. We're going to get some questions here as well, and then you can maybe talk to everyone here again about some of your personal experiences on the battlefield. But I think, again, we want to say to everyone what a privilege and honor it is to be on that field, right? To be, again, to have those stories of those men and to be able to convey that to them. It never, it's gotten old for me. I mean, I started when I was 1989 is when I did my first stat acrobatics. I said to these kids today who are coming to Gettysburg, I was driving away from campus this morning and saw Oak Ridge. Doesn't get old. Never ever gets old. All right, so we have some questions here. We have lots of questions here. my eyesight is not great. Jill, do you have any favorites there that I should go to?
What about this question from Stephen Gilroy? Were you required by the Park Service to include anything in your tour, such as more references to slavery as the cause of the war?
The test covers a lot of that information about, causes of the war being clearly, definitely slavery, women's roles. So African Americans' roles, women's roles, we're required to know it for the test. We are not mandated to say it on a tour. Our mandate is the person in the vehicle who asks the question.
Right. And when we do our oral exam, we don't have a script. We're not told this is what you have to do. I mean, we're expected to go all 3 days of the battle. We're expected to go to Culp's Hill and talk about those things. But we're not, as long as we give a tour to the satisfaction of our examiners, then it's okay. It's not anything in particular we have to do. It's kind of what we as guides want to focus on. I mean, we were told have a theme when you do the tour, but you don't have to have this theme.
I'm glad you said that. That's very important. I think that there is an assumption out there that, the federal government's coming in and they're gonna take down our monuments and then they're gonna force people to say the same party line. It's not even remotely close to that. And whether it's Park Service or the licensed battlefield guides, they expect you to have historical knowledge, as they should, but no one's mandating anything out there. You can do what you want to do. Chuck, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I mean, I think Sue gave a great response to that.
Jill, do you have a favorite? I see one right in the middle. Or you want to go to, is there any kind of certification?
Recertification.
Recertification,
Or
thank you.
once you take the exam, are you a guide forever?
There is no, we receive that question quite a bit from our guests, and there is no recertification. As I often say to many of our guests and many other folks, that if you're a licensed battlefield guide, you take it upon yourself in terms of, for the most part, continuous improvement, reading, research, special tours, furthering your special interests, right, in terms of Civil War history, battle history. Obviously, there is an annual licensing fee, and depending on your guide classification, full-time, part-time, there are minimum tours, which by the way have been waived during the pandemic. There are those kinds of requirements, but there's no recertification per se.
I think that's the point of the required number of tours, is to stay sharp.
Keeps you sharp
Yeah.
as well. I like the question. I hope it hasn't disappeared. Oh, there it is. Do you have a favorite story or spot on the battlefield that you always try to include on your tour? Teresa, why don't we go? Do you have a favorite spot?
I don't think I do yet.
Really?
I haven't been doing this long enough to have a favorite spot.
So I'm going to prove why I would fail the guide test. Your husband's ancestor, you already mentioned the regiment. Where was he killed on the battlefield?
He was wounded at the Kadori farm on July 2nd.
Reichs Brigade.
Yes.
See?
Yeah. The hard part is there are no records from the 82nd New York as far as in-depth information.
Right.
Their colonel is killed here, so you've got a junior officer writing the report, very little in it. Patrick died here, there's no letters, beyond the journey here, and there's no records that I found from anybody else from that regiment, so it's hard to do in-depth
To
of
recreate
what
that.
happened there. Yeah.
That's great.
So Peter, I just want to remind you that you affirmed the order of battle there.
I know. I like to argue against myself.
You went to the regimental level, right? You went down below brigade level, but I mean, that's the value of the order of battle. I mean.
No, I don't dispute that.
I know, I'm just kidding.
Right, yeah. So what's your favorite spot on the battlefield? And you can have more than one if you'd like.
Well, you mentioned Reynolds early in our conversation. So Herbst Woods is an area that is of great interest to me. Eternal Memorial Peace Light, right, is another area. The Alabama Monument is a great perspective for day 2. Sickles, of course, Peach Orchard. Little Round Top, our $1 million view,
On a good day.
and
So,
so those are some. Culp's Hill is another area. I know that's close to Sue's heart.
we're gonna get to you in just a second. I'm not suggesting that you're not talking about a range of issues such as the internal peace life, but I wanna just again make a plug for my colleague, Jill Titus, whose research, about 1963, and that on the platform that day was, and Jill, correct me if I screw this up, so we have Governor George Wallace, right, who's right there, but we also have the person who does the prayer, who was, she's not a minister, but she's African, she was a minister, African-American from Gettysburg. And it is, and I'm serious, it is my hope that after Jill's book comes out, that one, that you'd speak to the guys, and then two, that when people go there, when you go there, that you talk about that moment, right? In that moment, especially contrasted with when the monument was dedicated in 38 with FDR, and how this landscape has changed, but more importantly, that we have in that moment, I would have loved to have been there, see George Wallace squirming in his seat, where this African-American woman, we don't have her full sermon, I believe, or her prayer, but we have elements of it. And I hope that will become more of the conversation out on the battlefield, right? And I'm telling you, Jill, thanks to, again, her research, we did a number of tours for various classes at Gettysburg College. I had more Black engagement than I've had in my entire career, ever. We were able to do that. I hope we'll continue to do it. All right. Well, we've already given it away. You like Culp's Hill. Tell us why. You must really like it now because they've done that nice restoration or rehab.
Well, I love, my two favorite places are Culp's Hill and the National Cemetery. But Culp's Hill, because like a lot of guys, my homeboys were there. Where the part of Pennsylvania I'm from, recruited the 147th Pennsylvania Regiment, and they fought on Culp's Hill. And it was such a challenging place to learn because it's not a well-interpreted place, and part of it was the landscape.
Right.
So it was a challenge. I like challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's going to be, I believe, a walking trail that's going to be installed
Yes.
on the side of Culp's Hill, which is just, that's going to be phenomenal. We could tell the John Fudge story all the time. Do you know the John Fudge story? Well, we're going to have coffee someday. I'll tell you about it. You're hearing snickering from my fellow workers here. They think that's all I know about Culp's Hill. And they're right, that is all I know. All right, we have some more questions here. It's pretty pricey to take the exam. $300? Oh, Nelly. Or whereabouts, that's more than probably the LSATs. $300 or whereabouts is what I heard. Is that true? If so, there's really no taking the exam for fun. So let's just answer the basic question. Does it cost to take it?
It does cost.
It does.
Yes, now, when I took it, I think it was, and that was 2015, it was $100, but they bumped the price up. So, you know, when Sue's talking about it, you didn't have to pay as much to take the
$50.
test. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and please take that for fun colloquially. I meant that don't take it with the idea you're gonna pass it right out of the gate and you're gonna become a guide that year. Because it's just not that easy.
There are a lot of questions about whether people can request guides with specific strengths or who can give a tour of World War I sites on the battlefield, or, you know, all day on Culp's Hill. How much latitude do guests have when they request a specific tour?
As Sue said, it's the tour of the guest. And at least the reservation system for the foundation at the Museum Visitor Center is guides are required to stipulate preferences or areas of expertise, and I think the foundation tries to honor that. So, and if it's a self-book tour, I think that the guest can specify and request an area of interest and the length of the tour that they want to spend.
Right.
On that.
Yeah, I often take those types of tours when they call into the guide office. And I like that because it allows me to go in depth on something I may not know. I know the surface details.
Right.
And so if I have the time, I love those kind of tours because I do more research and then I learn something. And then next time I'm doing a basic tour,
Right.
I've got a little extra nugget of information.
Got a layer there
Yeah.
that you can add.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. So I'm gonna end with the question that I opened with. And that is, vast majority of visitors who come to Gettysburg, they don't use you all, right? And I think that's unfortunate. Now, we know that they go on other Park Service tours, right? And again, I'm not criticizing anybody here. I'm just trying for us to think about, can we change that? How can we do it, right? I mean, we want more people to be with you out on the battlefield. Why isn't that happening and what can we do about it?
Well, if everybody who came here wanted a guided tour, we need a lot more guides.
That's true, right? So,
I think it depends on what they're looking for. If it's just a quick trip through and it's like, oh, Gettysburg, I should stop here,
right,
they might not want any more in-depth
that's
information.
true, right.
I mean, from my perspective, if they want a comprehensive tour, yes, get a licensed battlefield guide. But maybe you just want a few little blurbs. So you can go to Little Round Top when a ranger is up there. You can go to the high water mark when a ranger is there. If you want more, I mean, I look forward to the day when the rangers are back here, out there doing their 2 and 3 hour battle walks, you know, because people that want to dive deep can do that. And they don't have to pay for it, which is okay too.
Well, that's one of the things you guys are up against,
Right,
the
yeah.
pay in Park Services.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think we're terribly expensive. But it's not an individual price, it's for the size of your group.
Sure.
But, you know, maybe you're not looking to pay for that, maybe you just want something free.
I mean, I think though you pointed to something, and that is most people who come to Gettysburg are maybe thinking, oh, 3 hours, not having any sense as to what awaits
big it
them, right?
is.
And how
Yeah, sure.
how big it is. I mean, I will say, and I'm not criticizing anyone, it's an unexpected consequence of the cost of keeping a museum going, and that is, it costs.
Yeah.
It costs to go to the museum, so you pay for the museum, you pay for the cyclorama and all that, and then get a guide. You know, we have, again, think about this, we have effectively priced ourselves out of, you know, working America, I think, for long. It's an issue, and again, there's no easy answer, I'm not criticizing anyone, we just need to be aware of the fact that, hey, there's only so much time and only so much money, and that's a challenge, that's a challenge. Chuck, what do you think? What magic wand would you wave to be able to get more people to come and use licensed battlefield guides?
I don't know if there's a magic wand. The thought that I have is, having been a guide has been transformative for me whenever I've been a tourist and I have a choice of trying to do it on my own or having a guide, right? Normandy, Versailles, Athens, you know, and obviously I've had some opportunities and fortunate to have been able to do those kinds of things. But the way I feel about it is, this may be the only time in my life where I will be on the beaches of Normandy. Am I going to try to do this on my own? Or am I going to rely on the effort, experience, study, history that has been obtained by another individual? And it is so value laden in that way. So probably there could be more awareness of licensed battlefield guides, more publicity.
When you
more
come to the
promotion.
visitor center, it's hard to, it's confusing to a visitor, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And that's, again,
Yeah.
nobody's fault. You come in and, oh, wait, there's the information desk with the Park Service people, and oh, wait, there's some other things down here for ticketing, and oh, wait, let's not forget the bookstore, right?
Right.
And the fudge, you can't overlook the fudge, good fudge there, right? You can understand how a visitor would not really know where to turn, right? It's tough, and there's no easy answers. to any
The
of this.
public often confuses us with National Park Service rangers.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think, again, this conversation should give us empathy for everyone that's involved, but everybody is trying to do the best for the visitors, right?
Right.
And give them the most meaningful experience within the time and the money that they have, and that's no easy task. It's easy for those of us who are tourists and come by, and we can be critical of the American public for, not really understanding. I think we need to take a big, deep breath here, and be grateful that they're here and understand that, hey, man, they've taken a few hours. If I'm a working dude, I'm obviously not, but if I was, and I had 2 weeks of vacation, and I spent a day or two here, or even just a day, that's a hell of a commitment, I think, as well. Well, again, I just want to thank the three of you. I think you're going to be at CWI as well, aren't you? Next year?
Yeah.
How about that? Are you impressed, Ashley? You're doing, I'm gonna nail this, right? You're doing Medal of Honor winners.
Recipients.
Recipients.
Medal of Honor recipients.
Recipients.
Yes.
You're good. She gets me, probably a little, see, you're just like Ashley did. But I did remember, so yeah, you're gonna be joining this as well.
See, I'm married also, so.
Okay. There,
Somebody's gotta correct that.
Somebody's got to correct us. You're absolutely right. I just want to say again, my deep appreciation for you all coming here tonight, for all that you do. It means so much to that person, to that kid from Indiana, who's just a boy, right, with his parents. And don't imagine that kid sitting right next to him, right? He said to him, he said, "No, let him sit up in the passenger seat." I absolutely remember that. And to think that you are having that kind of impact, that the licensed battlefield guys are doing that in ways that they can't even imagine. It is a real service, and so we so appreciate it. And of course, look forward to working with you all again. I think it's wonderful that you all become such a big part of the Civil War Institute. So thank you again so much. So before I say good evening, I want to thank again Ashley Lusky, who is behind me. We've got Joe Titus off to my right. Heather Miller, she's probably asleep by now, I suspect, but she has helped us as well to get things going. I'm going to see, I hope all of you tomorrow morning. Kim Masterson Brown, 10:30, right? Chuck, you're going to join us, aren't you? I want to get some questions.
I'm gonna be on the battlefield tomorrow morning.
Oh, man. We'll tape it. We'll send it to you. We'll get
Thank
the
you.
tape.
Thank you.
Hey, you all, thank you so much again. Any support you can provide for CWI, we would certainly appreciate that. You've got the code to buy books from UNC Press, so buy away. And we look forward to seeing you all tomorrow morning. Anything I need to remember or say? Lots of things I need to remember. Ashley, did I miss anything?
I don't think so.
Look
Thanks,
at
guys.
this, I'm finding. All right, y'all, have a wonderful evening. We'll see you all tomorrow morning. Thank you all so much.